That quote, it's not just a soundbite, right? It's really the heart of a political platform that was trying to completely reshape American policy. And today, we're going to break down exactly what that vision looked like. So, we're winding the clock back to 2016. We're going to really dig into the policy blueprint of a major presidential campaign from that time. We're going to look at the problems it wanted to solve and the future it was promising. And we'll do it using only the campaign's own words. So, here's the game plan for today. First, we're talking about money, what's in your pocket. Then we'll zoom out to the broader fight for equality. After that, we're going to tackle the huge issue of climate change. And we'll wrap up by looking at the promises made to veterans before we pull it all together at the end. All right, first up, economic justice. Now, the campaign didn't just frame this as policy. For them, it was a moral imperative. And the whole thing was built around one single, really powerful idea: a living wage. And this really gets to the core question the campaign was asking. For millions of Americans, the answer they gave was a hard no. The documents themselves were really blunt about it. They said, and I'm quoting here, "The current federal minimum wage is starvation pay and must become a living wage." Okay, so how were they going to fix it? Well, the platform laid out this four-part plan. First, a direct wage increase. Simple enough. Then, locking in equal pay for women. The third piece, expanding overtime protection, so extra hours actually mean extra pay. And finally, strengthening unions to give workers a much bigger voice when they're at the negotiating table. And all of this, it all led to the absolute centerpiece of the economic plan. I mean, this was the number that really came to define the whole debate: a federal minimum wage of $15 an hour, which would be phased in over several years. Now, this whole idea of a fair shot, it didn't just stop with economics. The next section of the platform took it a step further, focusing on equality and really zeroing in on the ongoing fight for LGBT rights. So a key point you'll find in these documents is that even with the huge landmark victory for marriage equality, the fight was far from over. The platform argued a core problem was still there. In a lot of places, legal discrimination in things like housing and employment was still a daily reality for people. And to back this up to build their case, the campaign material pointed to a pretty long history of support. They brought up things like supporting Burlington's very first Pride Parade way back in 1983, and later on some really crucial votes in Congress against policies like Don't Ask, Don't Tell, the one that barred openly gay people from serving in the military, and also the Defense of Marriage Act, which federally defined marriage as only being between a man and a woman. Now, what's interesting is when you look at future legislation, the documents actually show a really striking alignment. Both of the major primary campaigns pointed to the exact same two bills as the crucial next steps. You have the Equality Act, which was meant to codify federal non-discrimination protections, and the Every Child Deserves a Family Act, which was all about preventing discrimination in adoption. But beyond those two shared bills, the Clinton campaign documents listed some additional priorities. They talked about continuing President Obama's executive actions on LGBT equality, supporting court efforts to classify gender identity discrimination as a form of sex discrimination, and ending the practice of conversion therapy for minors nationwide. All right, let's move on to our third section. And this is a big one. It's a topic the campaign documents literally described as the single greatest threat facing our planet: climate change. And the way the platform framed this was, well, it was stark, totally unambiguous. It basically said, look, the scientific debate is over. The documents argued that failing to act would lead to absolutely catastrophic consequences. We're talking everything from rising sea levels to more and more extreme weather. So, the natural question is, if the science was settled, what was the holdup? And the platform pointed to one main obstacle: a political system that it described as rigged. Rigged by the lobbying power of the fossil fuel industry, which, the platform argued, was actively blocking any real progress just to protect its own profits. So the solution they proposed wasn't just about technology. It was deeply political. The plan called for some pretty radical steps: banning fossil fuel lobbyists from working in the White House, fighting to overturn the Citizens United Supreme Court decision, the one that opened the floodgates for corporate money in politics, and, in a pretty controversial move, actually bringing climate deniers to justice, meaning pursuing legal action against companies that might have knowingly spread misinformation about climate change. And to put a price tag on all of this, the platform identified a massive number: $135 billion. That's how much it claimed the fossil fuel industry would get in taxpayer subsidies and corporate welfare over the next 10 years. And the plan? It proposed to end all of it. But here's the other side of that coin.
The platform argued that by shifting those investments away from fossil fuels, it could create a brand new, clean energy workforce, creating 10 million new, good-paying jobs in the process.
So what did this all boil down to? A few core targets, really. First, cutting U.S. carbon pollution by 40% by 2030. Second, creating a 100% clean energy system. And third, taxing polluters and then returning those funds directly to working families to help them out with costs. Okay, on to our final policy area for today. The documents frame this one as a moral obligation. We're talking about the nation's promise to care for those who served in the military. And right at the center of the platform's approach was this specific piece of legislation. It was held up as a bipartisan fix to the whole VA wait time scandal, and the goal was to strengthen the system by hiring more doctors and nurses, and also giving some veterans the choice to see private doctors if they needed to. The platform then built on that foundation with a few really key commitments. First and foremost, to fully fund and expand the VA system, making it clear they were against privatizing it. They also proposed to substantially improve how claims are processed and to launch a major expansion of services. We're talking expanded mental health care, more support for caregivers, and for the very first time, making comprehensive dental care available to all veterans. So we've just walked through 4 pretty distinct policy areas. But what's the big picture here? How do all these different ideas actually connect and form one single, cohesive vision? Well, when you step back, you can really see 4 core pillars emerge from these documents. First, there's this intense focus on economic security and dignity for working people. Second, a deep commitment to expanding civil rights and social equality for everyone. Third, a really urgent and aggressive plan to take on the climate crisis. And finally, this powerful belief in honoring the country's moral obligations to its people, especially its veterans. And all of this, it brings us to one final and I think crucial question. When we look at the snapshot from 2016, these bold proposals, these sharp arguments, we've got to ask ourselves, where are these ideas today? How have they changed? And maybe, most importantly, how are they still shaping the political debates that we are all living through right now?